And joining me now is Congressman Stephen Horsford, Democrat of Nevada and chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Congressman, Mr. Chairman, it's been nearly 60 years since John Lewis and Hosea Williams, Amelia Boynton, and some 600 others first marched across that bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge. You and I just marched across with the vice president, yet we still find ourselves contending with conservative forces seeking to curtail ballot access for minority voters or students. And in the case of Alabama, dilute the power of the black vote. What are your thoughts as the CBC chair as we walked across that historic bridge 59 years later and still fighting for voting rights? Supreme Court took Section 5 out of the Voting Rights Act, a Trump-appointed court in many ways. What was going through your mind?
Well, Reverend Al, it's great to be here with you in Selma. It's great to have the Vice President join us, along with the foot soldiers who 59 years ago led this march, Bloody Sunday. Unfortunately, it was a march that led to the beating, to the bleeding and the near death of those marchers.
I pushed one of them in the wheelchair. You were right next to it. That, for people that saw the wheelchair, she was one of the original marchers on the bridge that was tear gas that day.
And they're still here marching for justice.
That's right.
And as you said, the march 59 years ago was about voting rights. 4 months after that march, 59 years ago, they passed the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act to follow. But now we are contending with people who are trying to take away or roll back freedoms, rights, and opportunities. And that's why in this moment it is so important for all of us to understand it is time for us to take up this baton of justice, to run our race in this moment, and to make sure that we do not go back, that we continue to press forward.
Now, as we honor the work of activists like the late John Lewis here in Selma today, and I'll never forget, just a few years ago, he surprised us about 3 months, I believe, before he died, and pulled up in a car. And he was feeble, and I was one of those that was honored to hold him up on that bridge, right where I did the prayer today.
Wow.
He did. And he told us to keep fighting. The vice president said that in a speech. But Senate Democrats today just reintroduced the voting rights legislation in his name, 6 months after the Alabama CBC member Terry Sewell introduced the House version of the bill, which would restore federal oversight to states and counties with a history of voter discrimination. Assuming it passes the Democratic majority Senate, Congressman, what kind of reception do you think you will get in the House?
Well, two things, Reverend Al. As you know, the House Democrats, led by Congresswoman Terry Sewell, in the last Congress passed not only the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, but also the Freedom to Vote Act, not once, but twice. And it is incumbent upon the Senate to move this legislation now, and it's incumbent upon Republicans to work with us in the House to get this legislation to the president. This is the first time in 40 years Republicans have not worked to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. And just think about it. This is about providing basic protections for people at the ballot box so that they're not standing in long lines without being able to be provided water or food, making sure that early vote and registration is accessible to voters. And so it is a fundamental right because it's the right by which all other rights exist.
Now, we all heard the vice president express her fears earlier about the perils currently facing our democracy. What are your concerns about the future of voting rights if Republicans retake the White House and the Senate, Congressman, Mr. Chairman?
Well, first of all, Donald Trump said 4 years ago when he ran for president to Black America, what do you have to lose? And then he appointed the most conservative Supreme Court justices who answered that question by making decisions to take away fundamental freedoms, rights, and opportunities. First and all, the freedom for women to make their own decisions about their health care body, the freedom for students and families to get relief from student debt, the ability for the Fearless Fund and programs like it to provide funding to programs. And now these are the same people who have filed these lawsuits who are trying to take economic opportunity away by eliminating or defunding diversity, equity, and inclusion, or programs that help uplift small businesses. And in this moment, we are sending a very clear message. We're not going back. We will not be silent. That's why we've called on major corporations to not only affirm their commitments to diversity, but really to uphold the commitments that they made around racial equity and closing the racial wealth divide in this nation.
Because I think a lot of people miss the fact that even some of these trials, the indictments, is whether the former president has undermined people's right to vote. To ask for votes in Georgia is to really undermine the big turnout of black voters there. But let me bring you another subject that I must raise while we're here talking to Selma. The president, President Joe Biden, and former President Trump both visited the Texas-Mexico border last week, offering contrasting views of a border security fight that has come to dominate Congress and its priorities. Biden pushed a bipartisan immigration reform bill. Trump condemned migrants and praised the state's governor as he fused with the administration over the state's strict border policies. Where do you see this issue headed this year with so many Republicans taking their cues from Donald Trump?
Well, just think about this. The Senate, with a 70-vote margin, approved a bipartisan bill to address border security. And because of Donald Trump saying, do not pass it, Speaker Johnson in the House said, not only will we not pass it, he won't bring it up for a vote. So rather than solving a problem and addressing an issue, they're playing politics. They're putting politics over our nation's security, the strengthening and providing the tools to our Customs and Border Patrol agents who desperately need resources. In addition to not approving the bipartisan bill, they won't approve funding.
Right.
So they're really hypocritical when it comes to this, and I really believe they want the problem to exist because they want to use it for elections and not actually to solve a problem for the American people. That's wrong, and that is why Donald Trump needs to get out of the way and let responsible leaders in Congress do our job and get a bill to the president that he can sign.